What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, we're going to play a game of The Price is Right.
The Price is Right. And now, here's your host.
Not the actual game. We're going to play a game of The Price is Right with your garden cost. Because a lot of you have wrote in and you want to know what it takes to build a garden like what we have. You're a first-time gardener, or you're just starting out even with the idea of putting in a garden, and you're fearful of what it's going to cost you. And I know a lot of people have also wrote in saying, I've already put in my first garden, but I'm wanting to expand, but I'm scared to do so just because of the amount of money that I invested in the first portion of my garden. And I really don't know if it's going to be worth my money to expand my garden. And so in today's episode, like I said, we're going to play the game of The Price is Right, because in the game of The Price is Right, you can be low and be fine, but if you go over, you bust. And the idea is we want to get as close to the best garden possible for the lowest possible price without going over, right? So in today's episode, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through lots of different examples. I'm going to show you so many examples of what I kind of call the golden ratio, which is what's going to get you to that excellent price point that you're looking for your garden. So with that, let's go. So when it comes to our garden here, a lot of you ask what it cost us to put this garden in. Now, the numbers are a little bit skewed because of the fact we put this garden in 2016. It's 2023. A lot's changed, as you're probably well aware. So I'm obviously talking in 2016 cost, but the idea is that when you put your garden in, it's an investment. And I know a lot of you probably invest, and what they always say is your money now will look to grow in the future. And so the cost of your garden will presumably always be going up. So it's all relative. If you put a garden in right now, fast forward 7 years, it's probably gonna be more expensive to put a garden in 7 years than it is right now. So that's kind of your peace of mind. So in 2016, when we put our garden in, we followed what we called and kind of considered the golden ratio of garden cost. And that is basically a 50% of the square footage should be put into cost. And how that kind of allocates is that our garden is 2,000 square feet. The cost to put our garden in was $1,000. And how that is broken down is the cost of the wood. The cost of the wood was about $400 for all of the wood for our raised beds. And then the soil to go in the raised beds was about $600. We had some really good quality compost that we trucked in, so we actually paid up for it. But the soil is the most important part in your garden. It's the thing you definitely should not skimp on. I mean, you could just take compost and make berms and have no wood at all if that's really what you want to go for. But the idea is that you never want to exceed 50% of the square footage in the cost of your garden. And I'll break down why in a second. You see, here's where the magic happens. When you stick to only about 50% of the square footage as the cost of your garden, what you're going to notice is that no matter really what you grow and how conservatively you space out your plants, you're still going to have a return on your money. Now, it's not a guarantee if things don't go according to plan. Like if your plants die, obviously, that's not going to have a return. But in the worst case scenario, basically, if everything does grow, you space everything out really far apart, you're still going to have a return on your investment within the first year, and that's the goal. The goal is not to have a return on your investment in the next 3 to 5 years. It's the first year that you want to see all your money come back in savings, and then every year after that is just basic maintenance. All right, so in the case of this cabbage here, cabbage is probably the least costly crop you're going to be growing in the garden, because I had a cabbage at a local grocery store. Granted, I know you guys are going to say, well, it's not organic, it's locally grown, it's homegrown, there's a premium to pay. I get it. I always go off grocery store cost because of the fact that, let's face it, that's the alternative. If we don't grow it, we're going to be buying it, and we're going to have to buy it from somewhere. And so if you're looking to save money, the grocery store is the least expensive place to go to. And so I had a cabbage for us at our local grocery store is about $1 to $1.50 a head. And so if we're growing 9 heads of cabbage in 9 square feet, we're essentially growing $9 at a minimum of cabbage in 9 square feet. Now, that is assuming that all of our cabbage mature. That is assuming that nothing goes wrong, but also we don't have a crystal ball. And so if we assumed that our cabbage was going to be overtaken by cabbage moths, well, you'd never plant cabbage, right? Because the future is totally unknown. So when we plant our seedlings, we are assuming we're going to get 100% success rate with our harvest. And if things don't go according to plan, that's fine, as you'll see, because again, remember, our goal was to return exactly how much we invested. And so our investment was 50% of the square footage. So if we plant out 9 square feet of cabbage, we only have to have 4.5 of them actually get to become a harvest for us to see a return on our investment. So only half have to actually survive for us to actually meet our goal. We're gonna double our goal in case other things go wrong. And that's the kind of buffer that you look at. Also, you have to remember, there are parts of your garden that are not gonna see as high of a return. There's space in between, kind of transition zones. I have some marigolds here just for pest control, to attract pollinators. These don't really provide a whole lot of dollar value to me, but they do provide dollar value in a reduction of pesticides, a greater chance of my other crops getting to full maturity. So there is a benefit to having them, absolutely, but they won't have, they won't have a real tangible dollar value back in my pocket by having them here. And so there's kind of those buffer zones as well, that you have zones that make you a lot of money, return your investment very quickly, and then there's areas that kind of rely on these to kind of pick up the slack. So that's one example with the cabbage. I'm gonna go show you the crazy one, which is the garlic right behind me. All right, so like I said, with our garlic, this is gonna blow you away. Garlic is a very, very high dollar value crop. And we love growing high dollar value crops like garlic, herbs, and other things that we'll talk about in today's episode, because these really these do the heavy lifting. These pull the other ones that lag behind back up, and this actually gives us a really good return on our investment. So in this bed here, we have about 200 heads of garlic. Now, we have only 50 square feet planted. That is a 4x return on our money, because we have 200 garlic heads, and the approximate cost per head is right around $1 per head at our local grocery store. And again, that's for inorganic. So these are grown organically, which has that much more of a premium, but I'm going to the very lowest case scenario, just a simple garlic to garlic, apples to apples comparison here. This is gonna give us a 4x return on our money. This is $200 in a $1,000 initial investment. That is absolutely amazing. Now, obviously, you have to know that you're gonna consume all of this garlic, otherwise don't plant it. I've always said, don't plant stuff you're not gonna eat, and don't plant more than you're gonna eat, because then that leads to waste. Now, you can donate it, you can sell it at a local farmer's market, you can give it away to friends and family if you want, but if you're looking at strictly saving money from your family's food bill, you have to know you're gonna eat this, and we love garlic. We'll throw garlic in everything, and 200 heads of garlic is probably not unrealistic for how many heads of garlic we actually consume over the course of 365 days. So I'm pretty sure this is gonna be enough garlic for us. Plus, we are gonna use some garlic as seed stock in the fall, so we're not gonna use all the garlic to consume. So out of this bed here, we're approximately gonna get $200 worth of garlic. That's a great return. All right, so now everybody's favorite crop in the garden, tomatoes. How do tomatoes fare with the golden ratio that we're talking about? Well, pretty good actually. Now, tomatoes do take up a bit more space than your average crop in the garden, but there's a few things you can do to increase your overall production and return on your investment from your tomato bed. And one of them is with intercropping. You'll notice we actually have in between our tomatoes, we have beets. Beets are a great crop because they don't get that tall, they're pretty fast maturing, and they're pretty expensive at the grocery store, but we can also use the beet greens in salads and smoothies and juice, but we can also use the beets just as you would a beet. And so you can juice them, throw them in salads, pickle them, whatever. They're a great crop to grow, and they're a wonderful little understory crop under our tomatoes. You could also throw things like herbs in, and we have a lot of videos on intercropping. I'd recommend checking out those videos. But basically the whole idea of intercropping is that the tomatoes are growing vertically, which allows us to grow more plants in a smaller area. That's helping us out square footage wise, but it's also allowing us to plant underneath the tomatoes as well, which is great because you're getting multiple plants in a single bed. Now, these T-posts did cost us some money, but I added that into the cost of the garden, so it really doesn't matter. These T-posts were about $6 a piece. I've got 12 in a raised bed, so like $72. But in this raised bed here, I've got 12 tomato plants, and 12 tomato plants take up each about 3 square feet on average. So this total bed here is 50 square feet, or about 2.5-ish square feet per tomato, but whatever, it's about 3 square feet per plant. And so with 12 tomatoes here, taking up 50 square feet, that's, you know, that's a really, really good amount of space being taken up for the amount of tomato plants we have in here. And I'm assuming that each tomato is going to give me right around, at a minimum, 5 pounds of tomatoes, upwards of 15 to 20 pounds of tomatoes, depending on the variety, obviously. Then we have sweet potatoes. So we have sweet potatoes here. These take up a decent amount of space, but we're still going to be getting about 7 to 10 pounds of sweet potatoes from this 9 square feet here. That's a great return. Just look at the price of sweet potatoes. Not cheap at all. We have our peppers here. Peppers kind of vary, small peppers, big peppers. The price on them vary as well, but you're still looking at about $1.50 per pound at our local grocery store. We got here 12 square feet of peppers. Those are gonna return probably in the tune of $35 to $40 in peppers this season. We have cucumbers here. The cucumbers are gonna grow vertically up a cattle panel trellis. And yes, I took the cost of the cattle panel trellis and the T-posts into account, but we're growing them up a trellis. So they're really only taking up maybe about a square foot of horizontal garden space, but vertically, they can get this whole trellis totally full. And we're gonna be growing probably $30 to $40 worth of cucumbers this year on this single trellis, which is great. And then we have potatoes right here. Now, potatoes are not the biggest return on your investment. They're really fun to grow for me. And the reason why I can justify growing potatoes is because I have so many other crops doing the heavy lifting for me, so that these potatoes here, I'm still probably gonna see at least double my return on my investment from my square footage taken up, but not nearly as much as things like tomatoes or garlic or things like that. You know, a 5-pound bag of potatoes at our local grocery store is maybe like $3, $4. They're really cheap. You can buy a 50-pound bag of potatoes for $15 at, you know, our bulk food stores. So they're not that expensive. These rows here, we have 2, 3, 4, 5, we have 6 rows of potatoes. And out of 6 rows of potatoes, we're probably gonna get maybe 120, 130 pounds of potatoes if everything goes according to plan. And so out of 120 pounds of potatoes, you're looking at maybe $30 to $40 in, maybe $30 to $40 in potatoes. So not an incredible yield, but still out of 50 square feet, $30 to $40 in potatoes, we're still at that 50% threshold, which is wonderful. All we have to do is grow $25 in potatoes and we've met our goal. So it's just the fact that it's a fun crop to grow for me. I've got a lot of other crops doing heavy lifting, and we eat a lot of potatoes as a family. So it's a crop that I enjoy growing, but you don't have to grow it if you don't want, or grow less of it and replace it with some other high dollar stuff. Now you will notice I don't have corn here. Why is that? Well, that's because corn is really, really inexpensive. You can buy a dozen ears of corn for like $4, but a dozen ears of corn is gonna take up, you know, 20, 30 square feet. It's just not justified for me. I'd much rather have a farmer grow it locally, support a local farmer, and that's why I don't have it in the garden here. There's a lot of other crops that, you know, take up less space but return more for me, and that's why corn's not here. But I want to show you another crop here that a lot of people ask about, and that's squash. All right, so squash. Now squash are a little bit odd because you have bush squash and vining squash. Here we have some, these are butternut squash. We actually grew these about 4 or 5 years ago or so. They were a mutation from a butternut squash, and we ended up saving the seeds, and we've been growing it out for many years now. And I love it because of the fact that you get so much yield on a squash and not so much seed cavity. But regardless, they are a vining squash, and we expect them to basically start here but trail throughout the entire back part of our garden here into our yard. And so how do these really kind of weigh in? Well, because they start in the garden, but they leave the garden, I still consider them part of the overall square footage, right, of what they take up. They're gonna take up probably 20 to 30 square feet per plant. 20 to 30 square feet per plant out here. But overall garden space, they're maybe only taking up about 3 to 5 square feet. And so they have a wonderful return on their investment because 3 to 5 square feet, but each squash plant is gonna yield between 3 and 5 actual butternut squash. And those are really expensive. At our local grocery store, just for standard butternut squash, you're talking between $3 to $6 depending on the time of year and the season and stuff like that, seasonality. So between $3 to $6 for a single squash, 3 to 5 square feet taken up, we're gonna grow about $18 worth of squash per plant. It's a wonderful return. It's about 6 times, it's about 6 times our return for the square footage that they take up. Now, if it were a bush squash, like a summer butter, like a patty pan squash or a crookneck squash, stuff like that, those take up a decent amount of square footage. We're talking, 6 to 9 square feet for a single plant. Those have a lesser return, but still really good if you can keep them healthy. They're gonna give you approximately 30 to 40 squash. And 30 to 40 squash, even at a low end of about $1 per squash, that's like $30 to $40 for those 9 square feet. That's not that bad. Then we have things like our lettuce, spinach, and kind of our spring crops. We're gonna get a ton of yield from those. We're probably gonna get $120, $130 worth of lettuce and other harvest from that bed right there. We have beds here that are in transition, our strawberry beds. We're not gonna get anything from those beds this year, so those beds are kind of into the overall, they're the laggards of the garden, right? They're actually slowing down the return on the investment, but we have the other heavy hitters. We have beds that are in transition that we haven't planted out yet because we're gonna be planting them out with other crops. So we have lots of stuff that's still kind of up and coming that we're gonna be planting. So overall, we have a really good mix of crops that are returning a lot. We have some crops that are returning less, and we have other crops like herbs, which are incredibly productive. They're incredibly valuable because fresh herbs are very expensive. Things like basil, thyme, sage, oregano, even dill. You're talking a little bunch of herbs for like $3. We're growing huge bunches of herbs for basically free. We have mounds of oregano in like every part of our garden. We have this dill here. We have wonderful dill that is basically growing as a volunteer. It grew from seeds that grew last year. It's growing wonderfully. Oh, it smells amazing. But these herbs here are very expensive and they're taking up almost no square footage in our garden. So try throwing some herbs in there as well, and you're really gonna see an incredible return on your investment. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I really do hope that this kind of opened your eyes to, because not only the purpose of a garden for me, like how I see a garden and it's the utility of a garden, but also the cost of said utility, right? How much should that utility cost you to get it up and running? I think a lot of people look at it like I'm losing out on this money. No, you're just foregoing that money. You're just you're putting that money in a place that's going to give you a much higher return. And so I can basically look at this in a strange roundabout way. I can look at this garden, I can say, it cost me $1,000, but I basically get a free vacation to Florida every single year from the savings. And I think everyone would like a free vacation to Florida. If you would, make sure to hit a like on this video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye.